Welcome back, Adobe Max 2017, Dell FMC Campus. We're here with Mr. Richard Harrington, and we are live streaming this to all the Adobe Max attendees as well as on our YouTube channel of Future Media Concepts. We want to thank Dell for having us out here. Check out all the awesome stuff around the perimeter, all the Dell workstations, precision workstations you're going to be working on. Without further ado, Mr. Richard Harrington.
Well, thank you guys for joining us here live in the booth at Adobe Max and the Dell campus, and those of you watching the live stream or the replay. We're going to be taking a look at Adobe Premiere Pro, and I want to show you how easy it is to use Adobe Premiere Pro to fix color and exposure problems. We're going to stick with just one effect, the Lumetri effect, which was designed to be a simple color correction tool that's still very powerful. And what happens is they took some inspiration from Lightroom, but then made it better. So if you've ever color corrected using Lightroom, it's going to seem very familiar. So for those of you who are in the booth, all I did was at the desktop level, I opened up the Fixing Color and Exposure project. It's here inside of Harrington Dell booth, Fixing Color Exposure in Premiere Pro, and we opened that up. Now, over in the project panel, I'm going to twirl down folder 1 and open up the sequence called 1.1, Evaluate. That's just going to give me some features here so we can take a look at some of the footage. And across the top you have a workspace switcher. So we're going to click on the word color here to switch to a color workspace. This is going to make it possible for us to get our job done. So I'm just going to use the window workspace color, and let me reset that to the saved layout if needed. And what you'll see here are a variety of tools specifically designed for working with color. So, for example, if we take a look at this first shot, you'll notice that the right-hand panel shows us controls about that shot. Over here in the left-hand side, I can also click on the word Lumetri Scopes to see what I'm working with. Now, you might have different scopes visible. I'm going to bring up one here called the Waveform Monitor, and this makes it easy to see what type of information we're working with. And ideally, you'll start to notice that you can actually see objects in the waveform monitor, helping you understand how that represents color. The brighter it gets, the more intense the colors are. So right now, if we look at the sky, it looks pretty blown out. Now, this isn't a raw file, so it's tough to recover, but we can bring some of this back. So under our basic corrections, I can simply pull down my highlights. And you'll see that some of the overexposed areas come back. You can also tone down the white point a little bit. And what that does is very easily helps recover some of the details in the sky. This is just like the same tools that are inside of Photoshop. Those of you coming up, feel free to grab a computer and get hands-on. Another thing we can do is go to the creative section here and apply some vibrance. Vibrance is going to bring out blues and greens, just like Photoshop, just like Lightroom. And so that area that looked washed out now starts to take on some of the color of the sky that we wanted. So I was able to bring some of that back and really help bring that to life. So hopefully that makes sense to y'all. All right. Let's go ahead and switch to a new sequence. We're going to go to folder 2, and I'm going to open up the first one here, 2-1. And what we have here is some footage that looks really flat. A lot of cameras these days, ranging all the way from GoPros up to Sony high-end cameras and Panasonics, have a mode either called flat color or native or log. And what that means is that the camera is going to purposefully capture as much information as possible. Now, you're thinking, it doesn't look like a lot of information. It looks really flat and boring, right? See how the histogram there has everything concentrated between basically 10 and 60? Well, it looks pretty boring. But, and here's the good news, this is actually ideal, because it means that all that information has been successfully captured. And it's almost impossible while shooting in the field to crush a black or clip a highlight. And so it makes it easier to shoot in tough native conditions. I turn this on my GoPro, my Panasonic, my Sony's. All of those cameras offer this option to me. It's either called flat color or log or sometimes native. Now, Premiere does under basic have input LUTs. And so you can apply some of these, like in this case, a generic ARRI LUT that helped. But it's not that hard. We're going to just do it by hand here. And I want to show you how easy it is to fix. So first off, pull the white slider to the right. And it's going to start to bring the whites up. And then pull the black slider to the left. And it's going to put darkness into the shadows. And then just add a little bit of contrast to the image. And it really starts to fill in. Under Creative, or the saturation slider here, you can round that out with a little bit of saturation, and all of a sudden, the shot has come back to life. Now you might be thinking, why would I do that? Well, again, it's going to make it that much safer when you shoot on the cameras to avoid losing detail, and you actually get a better color image. This is no different than the world of photography where we would push the blacks and the whites in the darkroom. This is concentrating the information into the middle and allowing you to get the most data. Does that make sense to those of you who are here live? All right, let's go to the creative section next, and you're going to see a whole bunch of digital film stocks. If you click on this look list, you'll see Fuji film stocks, Kodak film stocks, and other cool ones here that are labeled LDR for low dynamic range and HDR for high dynamic range. This is going to allow you to just apply a nice, clean film look. So it's a digital film stock. Now, Photoshop has very similar technology called a color lookup table, and there's a wealth of websites offering free and for sale looks. But what these do is allow you to generate a film look or simulate a traditional camera or an older type of film stock. Right here too, we can also just click with the presets to audition these, and if you see one you like, you click to apply it, and it will apply. And then with the intensity slider, you can say more or less to dial in exactly the look that you're going for. Also, and this one's awesome, the sharpen slider here does incredible things to make video look crisper. I'm not talking about out of focus video. What I'm talking about is that when we shoot on a DSLR or a GoPro, or you're going to an SD memory card, there's compression that's applied to the footage, and it inherently leads to a little bit of softening or loss of detail. Sharpening stuffs all that back in and finds the edges. So if you press the F key, you can see the before and after. And this was just shot on a DSLR to an SD memory card, actually a Sony A7. And look at how much more information is there, and we brought this shot back to life. Does this make sense to everyone? All right, let's go on to another example, 2.2. And in this case, we're going to fix a bad white balance. White is the reference point that cameras usually use to calculate. And when you're in situations with mixed lighting, it can get confused. Presets may not work. So, up here in the basic controls, you have an eyedropper. If you can click on something that should be white, it can often fix the color cast. Or, little secret, try something that should be gray, and you'll often get better results, because gray will have a little bit more reference color in it. So this brings that to life. I can continue to warm that up if needed, warming and cooling and adjusting the tint, and it comes along pretty far. Then, same thing. Little secret here, it's pretty simple. Pop the whites, but recover the highlights the opposite direction. Crush the blacks, but lift the shadows. And the contrast slider actually works very well in video. We'll refine the exposure there just a little lower, and a little boost to color. And all of a sudden, we're getting a pretty good shot. Now, you can adjust for the amount of the color correction, but what you can do is remove unwanted color casts very easily. And this really comes in handy when you've got white balance problems. All right, let's go to 2.3 here, and we're going to take a look at a shot that's just a little dark. This is a time-lapse shot, actually shot here in Las Vegas, out at the Valley of Fire. Great place to visit if you ever get a chance. It's about an hour and a half outside of town. Very relaxing, beautiful scenery. Any Star Trek fans, they used to shoot there, a bunch of Westerns shot there. That's where the Grog, the green alien guy was. All right, it's this otherworldly, beautiful place. Now, when we look at a shot like this, if we bring up our Lumetri scopes, you can kind of see what's happening in the shot. And I see that the shadows are a little muddy, and there's a little room to push the dynamic range. So, little pop on the contrast slider, and all of a sudden, we start to get a little bit more difference between what's light and what's dark. Contrast in Photoshop kind of sucks. Contrast in Premiere Pro is actually very useful. They've done a great job of coming up with a simple algorithm that makes the blacks and whites really pop. And that's what most people want to see. Now, same trick I taught you before. Lift your whites until your histogram starts getting close to 100. Maximum brightness on our whites. But if you move this to the right about 25, move the highlights to the left about 25. This way you get further separation and depth in your clouds. Okay? We'll do the same thing. I'll lift the shadows a little bit so the mountain becomes clearer, but bring the blacks down a similar amount the opposite direction. This push-pull relationship really helps when working with video footage. It's going to allow you to put proper contrast in and really bring it to life. Now, I want to let you in on an awesome tool that most people don't know about. Click on the category called Curves, and you should see Hue Saturation Curve. The Hue Saturation Curve allows you to tweak colors however you want. Let's go ahead here and just click on all of these little buttons on the bottom, and they're going to add some control points for us. And I could say, you know, the rock is a little too red. So let's pull the reds and oranges down towards the center here to tone down that color. And that looks good. I like how that's coming to life. Just a little bit less color there in the rock. But I really wish that the blues and purples in the sky, particularly the purples for sunset, came through a little more. And a little bit of boost here to some of these blues. And you'll see as you make that adjustment how the color in the sky begins to change to what you tell it. If you pull a point out, it adds color. If you push it in, it subtracts. And again, even with a moving shot, there's no selections to make, no masks to draw. It just lets you target the color very specifically. Now at the very bottom is the vignette category. Most people with video projects will add a gentle vignette to the edges. If you drag this to the left, it darkens the edges slightly, and that just pulls the viewer's eye into the center of the shot. You don't want to overdo it like this is overdoing it, just a little with a gentle feather, and you have a nice transition to pull the people into the shot. All right, those of you following along in the booth, were you able to get some of those tools to work okay for you? Great. Let's go to another shot then. We're going to go to 2.5 here. And actually, let's go to folder 3. We'll jump forward. And let's take a look in folder 3 at number 3.3. And what we want to do here is talk a little bit more about sharpening. So we got a great bald eagle walking across the rocks. These guys are really beautiful creatures. They look a lot more impressive when they're flying. When they're kind of walking on the ground, they're kind of like fat pigeon penguins, but they're still cool. And what we want to do is bring this shot to life a little bit. Well, first up, let's take a look at the basic correction and recover the highlights a little more to bring the sky back. Now we got a little color in the sky, and that helps. And I like where that's going. And I'm going to go ahead and lift the shadows a little bit while crushing the blacks. and a little boost to contrast. But the trick here is the feathers. So if we take a look at 100%, I just click on the Fit menu here and choose 100%. Watch how amazing under Creative sharpening is. It's just going to totally bring out the feathers. So you can use a negative value if you have too much noise, but a positive value on sharpening just brings details that are getting lost totally back to life and really helps things pop. So this is a great tool to do that. If you want to try that curves tool out again too, go back to curves here, and let's just bring out the sky a little more, and I'll just put a little bit more blue into my sky. There we go. And now I've got a bluer sky, which works really nicely. So it's awesome that we have this great flexibility. Under Creative too, remember that Vibrance slider is also a nice way to bring out sky detail. So you can use more than one of these tools to get results. Now, those of you hanging around the edge, we do have a couple more computers open up front if you want to play along with us here as we try out some footage. It's a lot of fun to make these adjustments. All right, let's do 3.4. And this is a shot of the Pacific Northwest. We're actually up in Vancouver here for this. Beautiful part of the country, but it doesn't have that feeling that I want it to. If you look at the second shot, this is how my mind's eye saw it. Nice bluish greens and really that cool sort of deep dark forest. When I was a kid, my dad used to tell me stories about the Wendigo and all these great feelings, and it just felt mysterious to me. This just looks like kind of like boring Christmas trees dying on a lot. So I want to pull that in a little bit. So there's a lot we can do. If you open up the project on the folder, and Paul, can you help them get open? You guys can follow along. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start and do that same little push-pull up here under basic correction. Let's go ahead and bring up the whites, but bring down the highlights. Let's go ahead and lift the shadows, but crush the blacks. And now, with a little bit more contrast even, we start to get really nice, dark, rich shadows that feel pretty good. Next, I want to make some targeted adjustments. So, classic recipe, whites up, highlights down, blacks down, shadows up. So, it's a simple game. Now, let's go into the creative section and put a little sharpening, and we're going to actually tone down the vibrance a little bit. That's going to go ahead and sort of pull out some of that oversaturated yellow. So a negative value in vibrance is helpful. And if you look here under shadow tint, you could even start to roll a little bit of blues into your shadows there. And it will start to introduce that blue into those deep, dark shadows. You just grab the little crosshair and pull it towards the color you want. Now, go to the curve section and take a look at your greens and blues. You can play with how those values come to life. A little more blue and bring it out. Then, under your creative section, find some of these great film stocks. In fact, in this case, I think I'm going to go with some of the cooler ones here. We got some great choices. Let's try blue steel. That looks pretty good. And we can just try out other options here. And we'll do blue moon. That looks good. So you can use any of these digital film stocks for your clip to change how it feels. And when you apply those lookup tables, it really does a nice job of bringing the footage to life. So as you work, you can dial that in and then just adjust the intensity of the slider until the film look gives you the results that you want. But this gives you the ability to turn digital video into digital film. And the key there is contrast ratio and getting the right type of curve in the shadows and highlights. Doesn't that take on a whole different feeling there? It just also ups the production value. Okay? All right, let's do another shot from the beginning here. We'll go down to section 4, and you can open up 4.2. We've got some pretty nasty color cast here, and we're gonna fix it. So this was shot under terrible lighting. I don't think I've seen a person look this bad in a while, okay? It's not her, it's the camera operator. So let's see if we can't recover some of this. So here's what we do. We'll go under the curves section and take a look. And if we start to evaluate the image, and this will be a lot easier if we look at our scopes. When you choose the Lumetri scopes, just make sure you're in the color workspace here. I want you to click on the wrench icon and take a look at the RGB parade. This is the key to fixing color balance issues. So I just clicked on the wrench icon and I brought up the RGB parade. Even if I did not have the ability to see color, or I was using a grayscale monitor, red, green, blue. What do we know about this? The red is way underrepresented in the signal, and the blue is through the roof. We need to balance this mixture out. Watch this. Go back to basic correction here with temperature and tint, and move the temperature and tint slider and watch what happens with the red and blue. This is just a teeter-totter. Seesaw. I'm sure there's some other name for it, but a balancing board. And as you move this left or right, you'll notice that the reds and blues balance out. Do you see how we fixed that issue? Just moving this left or right, we can work on the RGB parade to get it balanced. Then with the tint slider, tint moves reds and blues up or down in relationship to green. So if we have an image that should be balanced, notice now how the red, green, and blue are pretty equal next to each other? We solved the color problem. Piece of cake. Again, temperature and tint. But we can now lift the exposure a little bit and recover the highlights. There we go. Little lift to the shadows. And I bet you probably didn't think that that could become that. This isn't saying rush out there and try to shoot your video wrong. It is saying don't throw a shot away before you try to fix it. So what's happening there is you're just looking at your Lumetri scopes, and under the gear icon, we loaded up the RGB parade. And that made it very easy to use temperature and tint to balance things out. And then once the color was balanced, I could fix it. I'll reset that here really quick, and you'll see that again. I just pulled the temperature slider until red and blue looked sort of balanced with each other, and then used temperature or tint to get the red, green, and blue sort of even in height. And now you can dial that in and get the exposure that you need to sort of pull that into place. There we go. Tone down the vibrance a little bit. There we are. And this is going to sound strange, but watch this. Pull down the vibrance and then up the overall saturation. And sometimes if you've got too much color or too many skin tones, that's a great way to do it. You can actually pull down a little bit and then add it back. So it should be a fun way. And remember, you do have great film stocks here that you can apply to finish that out to give it a good look. All right, let's go to another color problem. I'm going to go to 4.4. And this one's close, but it's not quite right. We're going to fix skin tones. And to do this, we're going to look at a scope that's very useful to us. So I'll click on the wrench icon and choose my vector scope. The vector scope is helpful to see color. And this line that runs through it is often referred to as the flesh line. It's the color of human blood. And every skin tone, every nationality has the same color blood inside. And this helps you balance this out. So what we can do here is get a good looking shot. So I can look at that and say, you know what? We need a little more saturation. And it should get to the point of about almost up to the line. But do you see how his skin looks all orangey, kind of Cheeto-y? A couple people have this problem. What we can do here is actually make adjustments so that this line moves over a little. So as we nudge that line, it's going to help us get things more aligned. See, just a little bit of a boost. Clicking with the eyedropper may also help, but you may find that you need to do a little bit of manual nudging. And so by balancing out the skin tones, you can get them right. And that's going to help you. Now, if you just want to go after skin tones or another area, go down to where it says HSL secondary. This is a very cool tool that lets you affect one small area in the image. You take the eyedropper and click, and then you can use the plus eyedropper to add a little bit to that if needed. Now, I recommend checking the box next to color and gray so you can see what's being selected. And now you just adjust these sliders as needed until you're seeing what is selected and what's not. Okay? This is going to make it very easy for you to tweak that. And as you refine this here, there we go, I can tell it how much to fix. There we go. And I can broaden the reach to affect more saturation. There we are. And even soften that a little bit with some blurring. Now, any corrections I make are only applied to that area. We can start to lighten or darken that area. I can go in and say a little less saturation in the skin tones, but a little more contrast. And you can dial in the type of correction that you need. Less contrast there, come on. There we go. So you can dial in whatever type of adjustment you need, and I'm just going to go with a little less saturation, but a little more contrast. And you can pull in just the right change to a very specific area. All right, well, we are at the end of our hands-on time, but if you're looking to learn more, Future Media Concepts has all sorts of other opportunities, including a great conference called National Association of Broadcasters that you can check out. And they do have training centers around the United States and a couple of global locations. Also, a big thanks to Dell for hosting us here in the event. It's been wonderful to be able to talk to a lot of you, both live at Adobe Max, as well as those of you watching the stream. My name's Rich Harrington, and if you'd like to learn more about color correction in Premiere Pro, make sure you check out some of the great online resources that we have, or you can watch some of the replays of other videos we did this week that explored Premiere Pro. Thanks. You guys have any questions? I'm here for another 20 minutes. I can go through anything or address any open question you have on color. I'm just going to be going over there to the